Hello and welcome to Arts Alive Art. Today's programme is all about Thom Dagnall. Thom's a sculptor. He tends to work on a grand scale, and the chances are you may have seen some of his pieces in a number of public spaces, maybe Norton Priory in Runcorn or under the railway arches at Manchester University. This is Arte et Labore, which is on the M65 outside Burnley, and this is how it began.
This is a maquette for a piece that I ended up carving for near the motorway, near the M65 in Blackburn. And the idea about it was to bring out the sort of regeneration aspect of the area, because they were putting the motorway in and releasing land for housing and also for industrial use. And I thought about the idea of regeneration, and then I found out that the Blackburn with Darwin motto is Arte et Labore, and it means to work hard with skill. And I thought to work hard with skill is a really good sort of uplifting motto, and I thought I'd use their own motto. So I carved this guy who's leaning over the top of this block of stone, and he's actually carving the Blackburn with Darwin motto Arte et Labore on the front of the stone. So he's working hard with skill to carve their motto, which says to work hard with skill. So it was a kind of a double take. And in the final thing, there's a big pile of stone underneath, as if the stone that's carved off, he's carved the stone off. Obviously I did, but the block of stone was a massive block. Actually, it came out of a quarry near Horwich, and it weighed 92 ton when it was hauled over there. And I couldn't afford to shift it twice, so I shifted it to the spot, placed it there, then built some scaffolding around it and carved it on site. So the whole thing was carved where it now sits, because it was colossally expensive to move a block of stone that big. You know.
How long did that take?
Well, the whole project took the best part of a year, really, but that also involved the foundations, which had to be piled, and then it was on a big mound of rubbish that had been dropped there by the motorway, so it was unstable, the base, so it was piled, and then we built this with the help of my father. We built this. It's a sort of a stone cone, and then the rock actually just sits on top of that.
And what about the maquette? How long does the maquette take to make itself?
I can't remember. It took. It's a long time ago now. It's probably 20 odd years ago now. But it probably took, I don't know, about 3 weeks, something like that, maybe more. I used to get quite involved in maquettes. I try not to make a maquette, actually, because I'd rather the actual thing be the first sort of expression of it, rather than to make it and then have to make it again. It's, I mean, part of the sort of the making of the maquette does help you in the final thing, but I'd sooner just do it once. I mean, I don't like drawing either, so right. I'd prefer it just to be that's it, when it finally arrives.
But you need maquettes sometimes, presumably, to explain to a commissioner what it's going to look like.
Yeah, that's the problem, really. And often, a commission that's up for grabs usually gets sort of 200 people plus to apply for it. Then they shortlist down to maybe 4 to 6, and then those people have got to then explain what they're going to do. They give a presentation of what they'll do, and so that was what this was for. This was to convince them that mine was the best out of the 6 people that applied for it. So it's I don't know. Anyway, I convinced them.
Now, of course, quite often you make a maquette, you put in a bid, you think you're going to get the job, and then it doesn't happen.
And then it doesn't happen. Absolutely, it's part of it. It's part of the. I once gave a talk to people that were just out of college, to sort of give them an idea of what it was like, and I based the whole talk on things that I hadn't got, things that I'd put in for that I hadn't got, to to try and make them realise that you've just got to plough on, really. You know, you've got to be dogged as well as, as well as be able to do the thing.
So one of the good examples of one that didn't happen was the Stratford one. Tell us about this one.
It's this one. Again, it was the same sort of process, and I got to thinking about sort of Shakespeare and thinking and looking at his characters, because I mean, I thought rather than just Shakespeare, his characters are what he's about, really. That's his expression. So I thought Falstaff is such a fantastic character, Falstaff. So I thought I would mainly use Falstaff as the thing, but also have it at his back, the man himself. Partly, funnily enough, the idea of having two figures came because in stone you couldn't stand a figure like that. You know, with the bulk of Falstaff, you couldn't stand it on two legs that are, in stone. So
in fact, Shakespeare is holding up Falstaff.
Yeah. Often in pieces of stone sculpture, you'll see a device, that allows the figure to stand. And I thought it was quite apt, really, to have the man himself as the device.
One of the things which strikes me about what makes a really great sculptor is the ability to take a really hard material like wood or stone or marble and make it look soft and pliable. And this is a fantastic example. This is a guy, you've taken a bit of you and made his mouth somehow look soft and open.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, what I've always sort of aimed towards is to be able to carve in timber as if I was modelling in clay. It's that sort of making things plastic and I suppose the speed of it as well. That the speed of modelling in clay is sort of instant, and to make sort of, as you say, something that's a lot harder and is immovable, to make that look as if it's got that that pliable nature to it. This was the overall idea of it, was to make it appear that there was something inside. That's the other thing that I try for, is to make it not just a surface thing, but make it appear that there are things inside that. And so the showing the teeth, and there's a bit of like our own mortality, and the way you look at horses' teeth to see their age and what have you. It's a bit there's a bit of that about it.
What happens if when you're carving something as closely as that, like the little teeth?
Yeah.
What happens if you go wrong? Can you get it right again?
No. It's when it's gone, it's gone. There is no getting it back. It's not as bad as you might think. I mean, it's the classic sort of Hamlet moment, isn't it? Where you chip it and the arm falls off or whatever. It's not as bad as that, because when you start, you're knocking and banging really hard, and then as you sort of creep towards the surface, you're taking smaller and smaller bits off, and it isn't as accurate as it looks. I suppose it's a bit like painting. It's a bit of a trick of the eye. When a really good painter will put a splodge of white on something, and it will make it appear as if that is the highlight on something, and it's incredibly crisp. And it's not, but that's the thing that you've got to try for, really. It's that it's only ever averagely right, isn't it? Everything is only ever averagely right, but you make it sort of almost that trick to make a line make you think what I want you to think. It's that sort of because it's always two parts of a piece of sculpture. Isn't just what I do, it's what you do when you see it, isn't it? That's the link that you get between, that's just the sort of conduit, isn't it, that I sort of transfer to you, with that.
about your sculptures is that they're not, if I may say so, conventionally beautiful. I mean, their faces are full of character, and they're not. I mean, this guy, for instance, is past his first flush of youth.
Bit like me.
Not at all like you, Tom. No.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that I thought about when I was first started carving was I wasn't really interested in what the thing looked like. It was more what it was like that I was after. I was after the sort of the way expressed rather than the way it looked. So I suppose that leads you not to worry about, as you say, conventional beauty, or because I mean that isn't what I was interested in. So it's come at from a different angle, really, I suppose.
But there's something going on in here. I mean, this guy, something's happened to him, or he's thinking, or he's brooding.
Yeah. Actually, I can't remember what he was thinking at the time. It's a long time ago. And that is a strange thing, actually, because often I'll come back to a piece that I carved a long time ago, and I've almost forgotten what it was about. I think maybe there's not enough memory in the hard drive to keep everything in forever. And I can go back and find it again after, root around and find all the things and look at it. But it's sometimes a surprise even to me what the thing is about, because as soon as I've finished a piece, bang, I'm on to the next piece. And, people say, oh, don't you really like the fact that all your stuff is around and whatever? And for me, that's not it. It's the process of the doing of it is my thing. Once it's finished, it's sort of, it's gone. It's for somebody else, really.
Of course, Thom doesn't just carve in wood. After the break, we'll have a look at some of his stonework, including his latest commission. We spent the first part of the programme talking about wood, but stone is a completely different matter, I guess.
It is. I started off carving timber and then moved into stone when I realised that there were certain things and certain commissions that weren't going to happen if I couldn't carve stone. And in fact, the first one, I'd never carved stone. The first commission I got, I'd never carved stone. And somebody just told me about it. And they'd actually bought the block of stone. In fact, it was in this kind of sandstone. It was in this red sandstone. And it now lives in Runcorn at Norton Priory. It's a Kneeling monk in Runcorn. And they bought the stone, which is really unusual for a commission. Normally I would buy the stone, but the stone was there. It was a given. So I put in for it, and I managed to convince them, even though I'd never carved stone before, that I could carve this without any trouble at all. So, you can go and have a look in Runcorn and at Norton Priory and see for yourself whether it worked or not. The actual difference between the materials is, it's completely different actually. Timber, you can slice through timber. With a sharp thing, you can sort of slice through it. And because it's a bit bendy, the waste material moves out of the way. So it's a bit like if you plane something, you get those lovely ribbons. It's the timber that's coming off has bent out of the way as you've sliced through it. Whereas stone, it isn't like that at all. The only way to get rid of stone is to work on its weakness, and its weakness is that it pulls apart really easily. In compression, it's really strong. You can build cathedrals on like tiny little columns. All that weight just sits on there. So in compression, if you hit it straight on, you're not going to do anything to it. Whereas in tension, it's really quite weak. So you can pull it apart. So what you have to do is you have to sort of dig under it and pull some away. And the easiest thing to get into it with is a point, because obviously that you can drive a point in easier than you can drive anything else into a piece of stone. And what you do is you sort of get under the surface and you flick off a piece in front of you. So, and the beauty of a point, as opposed to anything else, is that it gives a predictable outcome to what you're trying to do. It typically will take off a little sort of circular flake in front of it, and that's what you need. You need a sort of predictable outcome, obviously, because when it's gone, you know. So you can carve and you can start off with a flat chisel, but what tends to happen is if you put a flat chisel in, the outcome is less predictable. You sort of set up a kind of a fracture plane in the stone, and it can curl one way or curl the other way, and you can end up losing something that you didn't want to lose. Whereas the point, you drive it in and it gives you this little semicircular flake which pops off, so you know what's going to happen. Once you've finished with a point, and I mean that you use that for making the shape of the thing, if you know what I mean, for roughing out. To get the overall shape of the thing, you need to carve the block of whatever it is into the shape without the detail. You've got to rough it out into the shape, and it isn't always the shape that you imagine that you need. So, with the help of my lovely assistant, that if I was carving Chris, that would be the shape that I would have to carve before I started carving the details. And if I didn't carve that shape, then it wouldn't look anything like him. And I mean that because of the glasses as well. It's quite an unusual shape, but that's what you've got to do. So, and that's really done with a point, you know, to rough it out into that sort of shape. The stage on from that, I mean, it's really quite primitive, really. You know, you go for a series of points. So it's a comb, this now, or a scotch, and it's basically just loads of little points, but they do the same thing as the big point did. So they give you loads of little semicircles, which mean you can then start to refine the shape and again give you a predictable sort of outcome to what you're doing. If you use a flat chisel rather than this, it'll do that thing where it'll wander, and you know it's a bit of a nightmare, really. So you've really got to go through the stages to be sure of what's going to happen in the thing. And I mean, then you are then allowed at the end to use a flat chisel, and that will allow you to get any shape you want.
And presumably different stones have different qualities, and so you learn to allow for the different variations in the structure.
Yeah. Well, this is the Triassic red bunter that all of Liverpool is sat on, and all the Cheshire Plain, and it's really nice to carve. Actually, it's got the quality that all the grains are the same size, so that you know there isn't anything sort of big flicking out or whatever.
Thom's most recent commission was for the Chelsea Flower Show.
So your latest project is an unusual one in a way, because it's flat. It's a pavement, isn't it? Tell us about that.
It is. It's a guy called John Everest, who's a local garden designer, is putting a garden in this year for Chelsea, for the flower show. And it's a very personal garden to him, because it's about his father, who was shot down over France during the war, parachuted in, and then managed to escape back to England with the help of the resistance. So it's called the Evader's Garden. And he asked me, could I have a look at making a path that runs through the garden look like a parachute to sort of tell the story of his father. So that's what I'm doing. I've got these blocks of Portland limestone, which is an absolute delight to carve. It's like cheese. It's lovely. And I've cut the blocks of stone so that they follow the path round, and then I'm carving through them, which does form some problems in that carving across a joint is quite difficult, but it's working because it's such a forgiving stone. It's working. It's not soft but not brittle, you know. So it's a good stone if you want to start stone carving. You know, it's a good stone to have a go at.
Now over there you've got some cloth, which is your model for it. But what do you do? I mean, do you draw onto the stone first, or can you just see it in your head?
Well, that is because I can't hold enough information to carve a whole thing. You know, I need a model for this. Cloth is one of those things. It's glaringly obvious. If you carve some cloth and you haven't sort of followed the sort of rules of how cloth folds, it's glaringly obvious. It looks awful. Because it's one of those things, it's like folding a piece of metal up. You never lose any and you never gain any, you just fold it up. And cloth is the same, you never lose any. And provided you follow those rules, then it will look okay. So I've got a model to lay out the shape, because the other thing in this case is that it's got to start here and it's got to end over there, because this is the path that, you know, and it's set out for the garden. He gave me a drawing for the garden, and these are the points that it's got to, you know, start and end. So that's my parachute, and this will be the path.
Well, the good news is that the whole garden, designed by John Everest, won a silver gilt medal at Chelsea and will now be dismantled and moved permanently to Astley Park in Chorley. And before we go, just time to say that Tom's daughter Tilly is also a sculptor, and her work White Beam is now on show at the Meadow Sculptors in Salford Meadows. So keep your eyes open for those Dagnalls. Their work is well worth the detour. See you next time.